Live, and welcome to FrankieSense and More. This is our last show of 2020. We will be back to see you in 2021, but Brent is here with me. He is our resident movie critic, and he has some great movies that we're going to talk about today. Some you'll be able to find, some are a little more difficult, but that's okay. You know, bear with it because they're all worth looking at least some of them. I'm going to share my screen with you so that you folks can see the movie poster of our first movie. Hey, Brent.
Hey, Frankie. Hey, everybody
so
out there.
Is this still part of the St. Louis movie?
Well, the St. Louis Festival is over with, but this was streaming through some other sources beforehand, and it's probably still available as well.
Yeah. Well, The Artist's Wife is definitely still available because I just watched it on, I think, Apple or Prime or something.
Okay. Yeah, this is a really good film.
Really good film.
It's a remarkable sort of return to the screen in many ways for Bruce Dern, who is definitely getting up in years. But he and Lena Olin play a married couple. He's a famous painter. She gave up her career to help support him throughout the years, help him develop. And he's now on the verge of developing the first signs of Alzheimer's. And it's become difficult for her to manage because he's by nature rather egotistical and capricious and temperamental. But now you add unpredictability to the mix. And it's difficult for her also because she's beginning to have some regrets about having given up her own career as well. She's quite obviously very talented herself. So she's struggling with all these issues in terms of how she wants to proceed with essentially, the second half of her life. Does she want to go back and pursue her career that she's put on hold? But at the same time, how can she reconcile that with all the responsibility she has with caring for an increasingly needy husband? So it's a very complicated story between what's going on with her and what's going on in her relationship and her career. She's also helping to try and reconnect her husband with his daughter from a first marriage, and that's a difficult process as well. So it's a very involved story in many ways, but brilliantly acted by everybody involved. I mean,
I love Lena Olin. I have always loved Lena Olin, and it was kind of a different role for Bruce Dern in a way because usually he's like the bad guy or scary guy sometimes, but he's quite the loving husband, except for his little bouts, with the Alzheimer's. But it's an interesting movie that it sparked conversation with my husband and myself about, if you get that bad, are you going to want to take off? Do you want to look after me?
Exactly.
Where's the joy in life there for either of us, really? Because it's a little bit scary for her. He got a little violent. Sometimes Alzheimer's patients get violent, and she was, she couldn't control that. Not fun, not a fun rest of your life. And he was obviously a lot older than her. So, maybe 20, 30 years, maybe older than her. So, do you want to live with a guy that much older in Alzheimer's for your good years?
and also the fact that he's experiencing a great deal of frustration because he's preparing for a gallery show, probably what's going to be his last one. And all of a sudden his inspiration has abandoned him. So he's trying to put together pieces of art for this show and nothing's coming. And
he's teaching a class too. He's teaching a class in college that the students look at him like, you're friggin' crazy, buddy, and I don't even want to be here anymore.
This movie combines elements from a number of stories that maybe viewers have seen in other films. There's elements of the movie The Wife that came out a couple of years ago, where you have a supportive spouse for a husband. It combines elements of Away from Her, the Canadian film about
the one with Genevieve. That one?
No, it was with Julie Christie.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was so good. So good.
You have a spouse trying to deal with losing a spouse because she no longer recognizes him. You have elements from Still Alice, the movie about Alzheimer's with Julianne Moore. Yeah. And then you also have, there's a number of similarities between this and the movie Pollock, about the painter, the abstract painter, and his
Jackson.
bouts with mental illness and his very supportive wife in that film.
Yeah.
So there's a number of different influences that come into play here. It's also a very heartfelt film for the director, Tom Dolby. His father, Ray Dolby, the inventor of the Dolby noise reduction system, went through Alzheimer's at the end of his life.
Oh, wow.
So this was kind of a tribute to his dad as well. So there's a lot of things that all brought together in this picture, and it's very well done, very well acted. I'm hoping that Lena Olin and Bruce Dern will definitely get some consideration for award season, because they really give very strong performances. So
I agree. I really loved it a lot. And again, it's a good movie to watch with your family and have a good discussion about, end of life and how you feel about that kind of situation.
Absolutely.
I mean, I expect to be looked after, but or shoot me, one or the other. Yeah, it's pretty tough. It's kind of a tough situation for sure. But when you love somebody, and she obviously loved him very much, she wanted to be there. This next one, I love this next movie, Brent. The Dark Divide.
The Dark Divide, yes. This is a movie that's available for streaming online. It tells the story of a lepidopterist, that is a butterfly expert, who decides to go hiking through the Pacific Northwest, one of the most, unpopulated and barren areas in the country, looking for new species. And he does it at a time not long after his wife passes away from a very difficult bout from terminal cancer, played by Deborah Messing. And it's interesting that when he goes on this journey, he ends up discovering a lot of things about himself and a lot of things about the world that he hadn't really experienced before, because even though he's an expert in his field, he had pretty much done everything from, a distance, a research facility or so forth. He never really got out into the field to explore things quite the same extent that he does on this journey. And in many ways, he goes through a lot of personal changes. And it's kind of metaphoric in the fact that he ends up essentially going through the kind of metamorphosis that his subjects always go through, but that he himself has never gone through.
Interesting way to put that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a very interesting transition, the way he goes through discovering things about himself, spirituality, paranormal, because this is somebody who has been a pretty rigid thinking scientist, and all of a sudden he's in an area where they're talking about things like Bigfoot.
Yeah, and he's kind of a really quirky character, and you part of you roots for him, and another part of you's like, I don't know, man, you're kind of a weirdo. But what a role for Deborah Messing! Like, for folks who love her, hardly recognizable.
Exactly.
Yeah, really good for her. Really good for her, man.
This movie reminded me an awful lot of the Reese Witherspoon movie Wild, which came out a few years ago, where you have, in that story, you had a young woman who was grieving for the loss of her mother, going on this journey along the Pacific Crest Trail to kind of get her act together in ways that she hadn't in a long time. And in many ways, he's paralleling that.
Yes.
This one, like Wild, is also, it's based on a true story. The scientist is quite an expert in his field, and these days he is lecturing not only about butterfly species, but he also is talking about Bigfoot.
Yeah, it was very interesting. It was very interesting. He sees something and he's like, huh? Could it? Could it possibly? I lost our movie poster, so I had to go back and find them, if you guys were wondering what I was doing there.
So this one is playing. It is streaming online. I saw it at the St. Louis Film Festival, but it is available.
It is
otherwise for people who want to look for it online and take a look at it.
Yeah, pretty sure I got it on Prime Video.
Okay.
Or Apple, one of those two. So you guys can find it for sure. Really, really good movie. It was a little funny, a little sad, very enjoyable. Very enjoyable, and the scenery is beautiful. I mean, oh my
Gorgeous.
God, it's gorgeous out there.
He also meets a lot of really interesting and colorful characters along the way too.
Yeah.
His involvements with them aren't terribly long, but each one is very distinctive in its own way. And each one, he learns something new from each person he meets. So
I think the interesting part of him too is when you first meet him, he's not standoffish, but got that air of a professor, like, I'm
yes.
just a know-it-all kind of a thing, and don't bother me. And yet, as he goes through this journey of self-discovery and mourning for his wife, because now, I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens, right? When you find yourself alone again, you have to be able to live with yourself alone again. And, that's a whole thing. And he had promised that he was going to do this book, and he was looking for this new species and all of that. And so when he, at the end of it, he becomes a kind of a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's not only is he alone in his everyday life, but he's also alone pretty much most of the time when he's in the wilderness too.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So he's really having to come to terms and face things about himself that maybe he's never had the opportunity or the desire to look at before. And now it's like confronting him right straight up in the face. So,
yep. Okay, let me go back and find our posters here, and we'll share some more screen time with you. I've got Love Divine up.
yeah. Yes. Now, I don't know if you saw this one or not, but
I haven't. I saw the trailer and I loved it, and I couldn't find it.
This is a strange film. It's set in the near future in Brazil, which is a country that has experienced tremendous growth in religious fundamentalism in recent years. And in this near future date, it's become very ingrained in society to the point where it's even become part of the way things operate in government and official institutions and so forth. So it's really kind of even though Brazil is still claiming to be a secular state at this point, you can't help but escape the influence of fundamentalist Christianity everywhere you go. And for some people, that's fine. But for other people, it's like, well, don't bother me with this. This is not my thing. So you have a story here where there's a woman who's working in a notary office, and she's responsible for recording information about marriages and divorces and so forth. And every time she meets with one of her clients, she's always couching things in Christian fundamentalist terms, which some people are receptive to, some people are not. Those who are, she encourages them to join her and her husband in an organization they belong to called Divine Love, which is sort of a marriage support group, and it helps people whose relationships are troubled get back on track and so forth. And that all sounds well and good, except for the fact that this organization has got kind of a funky little secret. They allow wife swapping and husband because they believe that it's a way to kind of help these couples in trouble sort of reinvigorate their relationships. So essentially, anything goes, with one exception. The men are not allowed to climax with anybody except their own spouses.
Oh wow! Okay.
Because they don't want unwanted pregnancies to come up and so.
Oh, okay.
But it's interesting to see that this organization is really kind of, I guess you would say, sort of hypocritical. They profess to teach all these profound Christian teachings, and yet right away they're like, hey, you want to get freaky with somebody else, go right ahead.
Yeah. Thou shalt not cheat on thy wife.
Exactly. So the woman who is the notary, she and her husband basically have a very good marriage, except for the fact that they're having trouble having children. And he's going through all kinds of fertility treatments to see if he can increase his abilities. She's constantly praying to God, saying, please bring me a child. And finally, she does become pregnant. But as it turns out, the child is not her husband's, nor is it any of the other men who she had played around with at Divine Love.
So she's the Immaculate Conception.
Yes. The question is, are people going to believe it?
Yeah.
And
Hence divine love.
Exactly, exactly. So it has a really very interesting storyline that runs throughout it. Some of it's very funny, some of it's very satirical, some of it, causes people to question their faith.
And
What?
it's in Spanish, right?
Yes,
Or
Portuguese.
Portuguese. Yeah. And that's one thing I want to talk about a little bit about is not to a lot of people fear foreign film because they think, oh, I got to read it. I can't read it fast enough. I'm not going to understand it. But, my experience, and I'm sure yours has been the same, that once you get into the film, the body language, you're reading it and seeing it at the same time, and you don't even know that you're doing it anymore.
Exactly.
And it's just like you just get into the story.
Exactly.
It's so good. Like, you miss out on so many amazing films if you avoid foreign film.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And the thing is, there's some really interesting and funny little things in this picture too, in terms of trying to project what you would think a society would become like if it were suddenly influenced by this religious bent that wasn't there previously. They have things in it like ecclesiastical discos. Okay. And then they have drive-through pastoral advice centers.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's really,
and of course, Jesus is up on the hill, right, of Rio. I love it.
Now, one thing I do want to caution viewers about with this particular film is the fact that it is extremely, and I do mean extremely, sexually explicit. This particular director, Gabriel Mascaro, is part of a group of young new directors who doesn't believe that sex should be soft pedaled in films. So he doesn't exactly leave a whole lot to your imagination. Wow. So if you're somebody who's offended by this, then this is probably a movie you want to stay away from.
What's the rating on it?
I don't know if you even know if it's rated, to be honest.
Pornographic.
Well, he's a director who he's trying to make the distinction that just because you're showing sex explicitly doesn't necessarily mean it's porn. Mm-hmm. The fact that you can have these depictions and have it be part of, a normal story.
As long as it's not gratuitous, I think.
Well, it's integral to the story in many ways.
Yeah.
The fact that, you've got this, he really wants to kind of drive home this hypocrisy that's going on with this organization. And Brazil, as I'm not sure if you're aware or not, but Brazil has been hit with a lot of sex scandals in religious organizations in recent years. So, So this is not exactly terribly out of bounds for what they're accustomed to down there.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. All right. So beware. Yeah. It's not family viewing. Thank you for that. All right. Where happened to my share? Oh, here we go. Can you see this?
I'm not.
You're not privy to that? Okay, hold on. Let me share screen. Again, there we go. You should be able to see it now. Okay. Minor Premise.
There we go. Minor Premise. Okay. So this is another film that I saw at the St. Louis Film Festival and is now available for release through a number of different viewing options online. This is a movie that's part of a rising genre known as smart horror. The thing that distinguishes it from normal horror is that normal horror films, you got slasher films and things like that, which I don't even waste my time with. Minor Premise, though, with the smart horror theme, it intends to present a thoughtful, intelligent storyline with it. The horror aspects of it are not gratuitous by any means, but they are there enough to create suspense along the way. So basically, this tells the story of a scientist who is investigating a way to record our memories. And the reason why he's doing that is that not so much for taking a stroll down memory lane that you can watch anytime you want, but in a way that people can use in like psychotherapy to help show them exactly the nature of what memories are causing them perhaps to have psychological blockages or mental health issues or things like that. And the problem is that in his initial research, he's finding that the recording quality is kind of blurry. The images are obscured by clutter and Some of them are blurry, you know, things like that. So he's looking for a way to make them more visible. And he discovers that probably the best way he can do that is by figuring out how to separate out the different components of the images. And by doing that, he needs to tap into the brain to figure out where the input from each of these different areas is coming from, so that he can, you know, filter out the images and make them clearer. The problem is that when he decides to do this, he needs to have a human subject for his experiment. And he decides that since it's his experiment, he'll do it on himself. And what he ends up doing is the machine that ends up identifying the different areas where the input comes from not only separate out on the images, but they also separate out in his own mind.
Okay.
So suddenly, instead of having this, you know, cohesive thought process for the way he looks at things and does things, all of a sudden now he becomes very scattered.
He's like 4 or 5 of him thinking about.
There's 10.
10 of him. Okay.
10 of them. And the thing is, each one takes over for like 6 minutes every hour.
Oh, jeez.
Okay. And when one is in control, the others are not aware of what the one that's in control is doing. So he ends up engaging in all kinds of things that he doesn't remember. And basically, he and another research associate find that the only way he's going to fix this is by looking for ways to reintegrate himself. Well, that's easier said.
But he realizes somehow somebody realizes that this is happening to him.
Yeah, he realizes it in conjunction with one of his research associates, because what he's done is he's set up a series of video cameras around.
Okay, I see.
So that they capture his behavior, and then he.
So it's not scary horror, as in.
Well, there are some moments that are kind of scary, yeah, because I mean, when you have, you know, some aspects of his personality taking over, like anger.
Yeah.
Yeah, then you don't know what he's going to do, and
right.
he doesn't even know what he's going to do.
Right. Yeah.
So he's having to do some research to figure out what exactly is going on with me, so I can figure out a way to reintegrate all this.
Sounds really interesting, though.
It's a very interesting premise, you know, and when you think about the idea, for example, from say the studies of Carl Jung with the archetypes, this is really right in line with that there's the many within the one.
Yeah.
In terms of how they all operate together to create a finished whole. And he's looking to reestablish that, but like I say, that's easier said than done as the movie plays out. So the first 30 minutes or so are a little difficult to follow because it gets a little technical. Mm. So if you can hang on through those first 30 minutes or so, then you get into the meat of the story, and it's really quite captivating from that point to the end. And I understand that there is a sequel is in the works to this now as well, called Major Premise, which I'm not sure when that's going to come out, but Minor Premise this is the debut feature from a director named Eric Schultz, and he's done a terrific job here. So if you like things a little bit on the edgy side, and your sci-fi and your horror, and also something that's a little more intelligent than just trying to see how high they get the body count.
Yeah.
Go see it, you know.
All right. Let's see our next movie here. Mank.
Yeah. Now this is a movie that I'm going to basically throw out to viewers as saying, you decide whether you like it or not.
I couldn't get past the first 10 minutes, so I apologize. I gave up.
It's a film that's about the backstory of the writing of the script for Citizen Kane. And for those who were familiar with the story of Citizen Kane and the characters in which that movie was supposedly based on, you'll probably find it very interesting. Unfortunately, if you don't have that knowledge you're not taking that knowledge with you into the film, you might sit there kind of dumbfounded and lost throughout a lot of it. So basically, it's really what the story is about, is telling how the script came together with the work of scriptwriter Herman J. Mankiewicz, working in conjunction with Orson Welles, the creator of the film, and how Welles' movie depicts the story of the characters in real life that it was supposedly based on, that being William Randolph Hearst and his mistress, Marion Davies. It features some terrific performances by Gary Oldman and Amanda Seyfried. But it's not the kind of thing that you're going to gravitate to if it's unfamiliar information to you. So
that's
why
interesting.
I kind of leave it up to a you decide sort of situation.
Citizen Kane was the first movie, in our college courses of, that we studied. It's kind of interesting because even then, like, I don't know, like, I really don't get the big hoopla about that movie. I didn't back then, and I still don't.
Well, one of the things about Citizen Kane that really was sort of innovative were a lot of the production techniques that were used in it. The lighting, the cinematography, the camera angles, the telling a story out of sequence. I mean, those were things that typically did not happen prior to that point. So those were all considered very revolutionary ideas in filmmaking. And it opened the door for a lot of filmmakers subsequently, kind of gave them permission to do things that they maybe would not have been allowed or capable of doing before. In that sense, it's almost kind of like, it was sort of like the 2001 for its time, where you ended up, doing a whole bunch of things that were not done previously. Is it the greatest film of all time? I don't know. I would certainly put it in the top 50, as far as the right at the top itself. And I'm not sure, but
yeah, me.
It's a film that's certainly had a lot of folklore and a lot of mythology associated with it in many ways. Largely also because of the characters that it was dealing with. I mean, like William Randolph Hearst was this very powerful newspaper magnate, former politician, who like nobody dared touch up to that point. And when Wells made this movie, he was this 24-year-old young new filmmaker who was like, I don't care, I'm going to go ahead with it. And Mankiewicz, his screenwriter, knew Hearst personally. He was very involved with Hearst's inner circle, so he was aware of a lot of things that went on that he drew upon when he wrote the script. So
interesting. Okay, let's go back to our movies here. But it's on Netflix, so you guys can go to Netflix and see for yourself if you're going to like it or not.
Now we have this episode's movie to avoid at all costs. Stardust. I was really disappointed with this film. It's an origin story film about the career of David Bowie right before he started to hit it big. It's when he came to the U.S. and did a promotional tour to help get his name known and so forth. And in many ways, he ended up being kind of his own worst enemy as he was carrying out this promotional tour. The intent behind the film, as I understand it, was to try and show all of the influences that went into Bowie's development of his alter ego, Ziggy Stardust.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get that personally from the film because, I mean, I wasn't really quite aware that all these particular influences went into developing Ziggy Stardust. And it just sort of seems like a collection of episodic elements that are thrown together that just make Bowie look weird. And
is it a documentary style or movie style?
It's a biopic. I think, it was trying to be like this year's Bohemian Rhapsody or this year's Rocket Man, but it just doesn't cut it. And I was so disappointed because, I mean, I was a huge fan of Bowie, and he was such an incredible talent and such an iconic figure in so many ways that if you're going to do a biopic of him, I mean, come on, give him a decent movie to do that.
Yeah.
And this is just awful.
Who was the director?
That I have to check.
Somebody known, not known?
But it was, it was just really disappointing in so many ways. I mean, and there were so many things about it too that were kind of strange. The person who plays his publicist in the film is played by Mark Maron, who's like in his mid-50s. And from what I was reading on the background of the story, the publicist in the film was like only in his late 20s. So I
Oh,
mean, why?
yeah. Why would you give a 50-year-old?
Yeah. um, there are some good performances in it, but it just the story is not very well told, and
Especially, and you happen to be a Bowie lover. So as a Bowie lover, you hated it.
oh
It's
yeah, I
probably
did.
not very
I
good.
really did. And the thing
Yeah.
is, anybody who's expecting to see a bunch of Bowie music in it, forget it.
No
There's
Bowie music.
The only things that are in it are songs that Bowie covered by other artists.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Apparently, there was a rights issue with his estate in terms of getting the permission to use his material in the film.
Did somebody play Naomi in the film?
So I'm sorry.
Does anybody play Naomi and his wife in the film?
Um, no, this was
I mean Amon.
no, this is when he was married to his first wife, Angela.
Oh, okay.
That's played by Jenna Malone.
Okay.
And she gives a good performance. I mean, I can't really fault her for that, but it's kind of a thankless part in a really disappointing film. This one, this one could very well end up at the top of my list for worst movies of the year.
Really? Wow. Okay. Let's say goodbye to it then. Au revoir.
So the last couple films I want to talk about here are some things I just wanted to mention in passing. The first one is Cured, which is a documentary that played at the St. Louis Film Festival. And you and I have both had some contact with the makers of this film.
Yep.
To do something with it in a future point. Cured tells the story of the effort to get the American Psychiatric Association to eliminate homosexuality from the list of mental illnesses in the early 70s. And it's really very well put together, featuring a collection of terrific interviews with some of the people who were involved. Lots of archive footage showing some of the events that were important to the unfolding of this story. Anybody who is interested in seeing what was done prior to that point to try and quote unquote cure people of being gay,
horrible.
It's just horrifying to see what happened. And this is the effort to overcome that. And it's interesting in the fact that the change actually came relatively quickly. Sometimes these things will take decades and decades to unfold. This happened in a matter of just a couple of years, from the time of the Stonewall riots to the time when the APA dropped homosexuality from its list of mental illnesses. This one is getting ready, I guess, for a online release at some point.
Yeah, and we're gonna do this film more in depth when we talk to Patrick Salmon, and he asked that we give it a couple months before he could come and talk to us about it. I guess they're looking at award ceremonies maybe and things like that, but we're going to come back and do this more in depth with the makers of the film. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that.
And definitely, if nothing else at this point, I wanted to put the word out about this film that watch for it when it comes out, because it is a very well-made film. It's one of the best documentaries I've seen in a while.
Yeah, it's pretty heartbreaking what man does to man.
Oh, absolutely. Now, it's interesting you should mention that, because that sort of ties into this next film, There Is No Evil. This has been playing the film festival circuit, and it does have a distribution deal set, but there's been no release date set at this point. There Is No Evil is an Iranian film that features 4 vignettes about executioners who regret their work, which is a really kind of interesting topic when you think about it.
Not too many executioners these days, except in those kind of countries.
Exactly.
Well, I guess there are. I mean, we still, even here, we have the death sentence, but it's more clinical in a way.
Yeah, and the thing is, you never really, when you think of the term executioner, you never really associate the word remorse with it,
Yeah, I mean, I always think of Middle Ages and the kings going, okay, and then that's your job, right?
So
Make no say.
you have four different stories here exploring that particular notion, and um, it's excellent. I mean, this is a really very well made film. I believe it won the top prize at the Berlin Film Festival, and the director, who is considered a subversive by the Iranian government, was not allowed to even attend to collect his award. Um, so this one, it certainly provides a lot of food for thought in terms of the idea of sort of, man's inhumanity toward man,
Mm-hmm.
and how even the people responsible for carrying it out have regrets about it.
It would be hard. Be really hard, I think.
Exactly. Now, the thing that it's important to recognize is that you would think with a subject like this that it might very well be gratuitous. It's not.
Mhm.
It does. There are times when it is sort of shocking, but it's done in a way that is not meant to be graphic in terms of its presentation.
Mm-hmm.
So it will touch you in very profound ways, I think, when you're watching it. But you won't necessarily feel like, oh God, I can't look at this. It's just too gross. It's not like that, not at all. So that's a hard trick to pull off and do it effectively.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, pretty horrific. Sorry. Okay, I really want to see this movie though. There is no evil. Be interesting to see that. Hopefully it will get a release here and we'll be able to watch it. This next one, I looked everywhere for it. I saw the trailer. I loved it. I couldn't wait to watch it and I just couldn't find it.
Yeah, I think this one may be looking to get a distributor at this point. The Outside Story. It's a simple premise. The story of a film editor who spends most of his time cooped up in his Brooklyn apartment, and he ends up going out and locking himself out, and has to figure out a way to try to get back in.
Nobody knows him because he's so reclusive.
Exactly.
I live right next to you.
And, it's a very timely story in the fact that we've all been on lockdown for so long
Yeah.
that a lot of us haven't gotten out. But this is a film where he gets to meet people who live right next door to him he never knew, and it provides a very important lesson, I think, for those of us who get really caught up in our lives and our work, and we never take time to look up from what we're doing
Mm-hmm.
to see what's going on around us. And that's what he's given the opportunity to do here. And it's important to him because, his life being cooped up has not exactly been terribly happy. I mean, he's spends all his time working, and he had a live-in girlfriend who has just broken up with him, and it's kind of sad. But then again, it's very heartwarming and touching to see what comes from his day outside of his apartment.
Yeah.
Unexpectedly. I'm hoping this one gets picked up by somebody because it really it's fun. It's thoughtful.
It looked fun. The trailer looked lots of fun. I really want to see it.
And it's a terrific performance by Brian Tyree Henry. He's been in a number of films where he's played different kinds of supporting parts. He's proven through this performance that he can handle a lead really well, and he definitely deserves to get more work as a front because he's quite good at it. He can definitely handle it, and it's fun. It's a good movie.
All right, here's another one I wanted to see.
Yeah, now this one's got a little bit of a strange story. It was released previously at one point.
Yeah, in 2019.
And then it got pulled back, and now it's been kind of recirculating again, but it's kind of hard to figure out exactly where you can find it.
100 kilo d'etoile.
Yeah, the English translation is Stars by the Pound, and it tells the story of a young woman who is kind of chubby, but she really has a desire to become an astronaut. Although, given her physique, that might not be a realistic possibility.
Yeah, and she's French, so they're always, it's always a challenge to be chubby in French.
So she ends up, essentially trying to doing the kind of binging and purging sort of thing that like anorexics go through. And her parents become concerned, and they end up having her committed to a mental health facility. And while she's there, she meets several other residents who all have their own little quirks that they're trying to deal with. And she's desperate to get out because she wants to participate in the science fair. And she ends up recruiting the assistance of several of her fellow residents to get out of the facility and then go on a road trip to go to this science fair. And the thing is, it's a delightful film. It's funny, it's warm, and it's inspiring in terms of the idea of telling people that you can be what you want to be. There's no reason why you have to be held back by what others want. And even if you don't necessarily realize your dreams in full, perhaps you can adapt them in some way, and become something related to what you want to do. And she ends up being an inspiration not only for herself, but also for her fellow, road trip friends. So I'm not sure if this one's going to come back. It would be nice if it did. It's it's a very warm, funny, inspiring little film. Keep an eye out for it.
Yeah. I love the premise of it. I think it's awesome, and I really, really hope that we get to see it. And that's the thing about foreign films, I find, is it doesn't have that Hollywood formula. It doesn't follow that. You don't get bored because you don't know what's going to happen all the time. It's, they're a little quirky and genius, and makes viewing much more fun when you don't know exactly.
Exactly. Well, so much of what comes out of Hollywood these days is it's very formula, it's very franchise, and it might be well made, but there's just no surprise factor coming out to speak of. So
now, one movie that just came out, and I don't know, I think you may have written on it, I don't know. It came out, I was reading an article today, as one of the most underrated films of 2020 and unwatched, and that's the new one that just came out with Diane Lane and
Kevin Costner.
And Kevin Costner, but the grandson did you see that one?
I haven't seen that one.
They're renting it on it might be on Prime or something, but it's still a little expensive. I think it's like around $19 or something, which is a little high.
Yeah, it's interesting what's going on with distribution, because that's really changing. I mean, there was that big announcement that came out, I believe it was last week, where Warner Brothers announced that it was going to release its entire slate of 2021 releases simultaneously in theaters and on HBO Max. And that's a big change. I mean, to see a major studio like that suddenly automatically going to making streaming available from day one.
Well, I guess I figured they could make more money that way. People are still going to stay home and I think for a little while until the vaccine comes out and everybody gets, herd immunity, and you go to the movie theater with your mask on. It's hard to eat your popcorn, and
Well, there had been a kind of a trend away from people going to theaters even before this began.
Yeah.
They didn't like having to deal with the crowds or the rudeness of fellow, patrons or things like that.
Yeah.
And, there was this movement toward watching at home more right from that point.
Yeah.
But now, since you've been on lockdown and everything, it's become pretty much the only way you can see a lot of these things. So
it's our only entertainment. I mean, we went every weekend, sometimes twice a weekend, to the theater. It's expensive. I mean, it was probably like $40, $45 each visit, which is pricey, if you don't have it. But that was our source of entertainment. That's pretty much all we did. And, so we did it. We did it. So for me to say, $19 is kind of expensive. It is kind of expensive when you're not getting the movie viewer, the smell, the popcorn, the Dolby sound, the whole bit, right? But being in the theater is an experience. And if you love movies and you love the theater, then you like to go.
Oh, absolutely. I still prefer the theater experience to watching.
Yeah, but for sure.
it's right now it's just not possible. So
Yeah. Yeah. And as long as I'm not watching it on my computer, I'm happy. If it's at least on your 55 or whatever screen, you're okay. But, a good movie is a good movie, and you can get engrossed anywhere.
Now, you do have quite a few of the award season releases that are getting ready to come out over the next few weeks. I wasn't sure when they were going to come out, or in some cases, even if they were going to come out, because studios have been holding some things back.
Yeah, yeah.
But you will be seeing a number of the so-called, big award season movies starting to come out between now and like the end of January. Since the awards season has been moved back somewhat, I mean, like the Oscars are usually in February, they've been moved back to April for next year.
Okay.
They've given the studios and distributors a little bit of extra time to get their movies out. Usually they have to be by the end of the year. Now they're going to be giving them until, I believe it's the first half of February. So
are there any titles that you've heard that we should be looking for?
Yeah, one in particular that I've heard a lot of really good things about is Nomad with Frances McDormand.
Yes.
That's getting a lot of really good buzz. There's
also
love
her.
A little film called Minari, which
that rings a bell.
Yeah, it's getting a lot of attention. Probably in part because there haven't been as many bigger award season blockbusters coming out. So this is kind of being sort of looked at as like the little movie that could, in terms of getting perhaps, some awards recognition. There is a Korean film that I saw that may be nominated in the Best International Film category, called Beasts Clawing at Straws, which I didn't feature here because it's not quite really keeping in line with the kinds of movies that I typically review for this program, but it's very entertaining. It's think of it as being like a cross between the movies of the Coen brothers,
yeah,
and the movies of Bong Joon-ho, who made Parasite last year. It's a wickedly funny, dark crime comedy. So if you like things with a little bit of an edge,
yeah, that sounds like my kind of movie. I loved Parasite.
Yeah, if you like Parasite, you'll like this one. Definitely. They're very much cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
So, keep an eye out more for January. You'll see more of the big award season releases coming then.
Yeah.
We come back and we can talk about those.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll be back after the holidays. So let's welcome or wish everybody a happy, safe season, Christmas, New Year's, whatever it is that you celebrate. Happy Hanukkah to those who are celebrating that right now. We hope that you will be safe and that you will come back and join us probably the end of January. Give us some time to watch some of those movies that are going to come out, and we'll tell you all about them.
And keep watching movies in the meantime.
Yeah, keep watching movies. There's some great ones out there. Take care. I'm going to leave Facebook now. Goodbye, Facebook. Bye. All right, let me stop recording.